One of the most fundamental questions that any coaster enthusiast will have to answer during their lifetime is what their favorite coasters are. Personally, I haven't been too voiceful about my top coasters for one main reason. I haven't been able to decide which coasters I like the most. I've been blessed with the opportunity to ride so many great coasters over the past few years. Actually, a total of 179 during the writing of this video. It's at the point where I end up leaving so many good coasters off the list. There's a lot of tough decisions I had to make this list. So just because a coaster didn't make this list doesn't mean that it's bad. There's a bunch of coasters that are really close on this list. However, it's been really cool to watch my list grow over the years and see how many times the number one spot has changed hands since I started keeping track of it. I'll try to make at least one count of my top 25 coasters or more a year because I am always trying to get to new parks and get on more coasters. So if you're watching this over 1 year in the future, make sure to check back to see if I made an updated countdown. I've run a rather unique collection of coasters, yet a diverse collection of coasters based on the parks that I've been to. So what I've done is create a list of the parks that I've been to and what year I went to them so you guys have an idea of what will be on this list. Feel free to pause the video if you need more time to process all of the information that I put on the screen. Now we have so much to talk about today, so let me quickly explain my plan for this countdown. First, I'll be holding off on honorable mentions for now because that would just take up way too much time. Secondly, my plan is to spend a limited amount of time on each coaster talking about why it made the list and maybe one or two critiques I have with it if I feel like I need to mention them. Now with all that out of the way, let's jump into my top 25 late 2020 edition. At our number 25 spot, just sneaking onto the list, we have the world's tallest coaster with Kingda Ka located at Six Flags Great Adventure. What an epic ride. This is one of only 2 full circuit strata coasters in the world. I love the launch on this coaster. A front row ride on this coaster is one of the most extreme experiences in the world as you launch at a staggering 128 miles per hour. I was able to ride it in 2019 and 2020, and each ride I enjoyed it a little more. The top hat provides some decent sustained airtime, and I love barreling down the giant 417 foot drop in that giant airtime hill, which feels like a speed hill, which gives some nice projector airtime that always has me bracing myself. The only issues I have with this ride are the length and the restraints, as they can be painful depending on who you are. But other than that, this coaster is an awesome time and is definitely worth a good long wait. At the number 24 spot, we have a bit of a polarizing coaster with Mind Blower at Fun Spot Kissimmee. I got to visit Fun Spot Kissimmee twice, and the first time I visited the park, I rode Mind Blower a few times in the front row. But later that year, I went back to the park and I did a mini marathon in the back row. And that shined a whole new light on this coaster for me. If you only get to ride this ride once, do it in the back row. Mind Blower has a full package. It's got the insane drop, a great hang time filled inversion, standing airtime all over the place, including a signature double down, and oh yeah, one of those signature gravity group crazy bank turns. Not to mention how compact this coaster is either. This ride does everything right except the smoothness. Unfortunately, this ride has been rough since it was built, and I don't have a clue why. If somebody knows why this ride is so rough, please tell me in the comments below. But I love this ride outside of that, and I can see Mind Blower moving up on this list in the future after I get back down to Orlando. At the number 23 spot, we have one of 2 beat-em inverts on this list with Talon, which is actually my favorite coaster at Dorney Park. This is one of those rides I just had a heck of a lot of fun on. Once I get back to Dorney, there's a good chance this ride will fall off the list, but for now it stays on from the 4 rides I snagged on it in 2019. This ride feels like the perfect ride for enjoyment. I love the smoothness, the inversions had some great whippiness to them, the trenches made it feel like you're going way faster than you actually were, and you just gotta love the beautiful presentation of this ride. I don't have anything against this ride. The only issue that I have with it is the middle rows aren't that great, and this is probably the highest I could see this ride ranking. Overall, Talon is a great invert that is really underrated in my opinion. Coming in at the number 22 spot, we have another Gravity Group roadie with Ravine Flyer II at Waldameer. Ravine Flyer II is a great coaster packed with good pacing and airtime. The layout for this coaster is very creative, and I like how it goes over the road. Where else can you see something like that? Also, the more compact section of the ride on the side that the rest of the park sits on is very good as well. The crazy sideways overbang is probably my top moment on this ride. From what I've heard, I didn't get the best rides in this coaster, so that gives me all the more reason to go back to Waldameer soon. I thought the airtime was a little bit lacking for all the hype it gets, and I thought it was a bit overhyped as a whole. But other than that, Ravine Flyer II is a very solid coaster, and this is a mini voyage. I can't wait for that ride. At the number 21 spot, the only coaster from Six Flags Darien Lake to make this list, we have Ride of Steel. I love this ride. I'm so happy this coaster is at my home park. So it's my most ridden coaster ever. I love the airtime and speed on this coaster, especially in the front row. There's so many high intensity moments on this ride, just like the turn after the drop and the helixes. This ride is a monster for Darien Lake and just towers over everything else in the park besides Skyscreamer and the upcharge attractions. The only downside of this ride is the strong rattle you will experience if you sit anywhere outside of the front few rows, but if you sit towards the front, you will have a silky smooth ride. Overall, Ride of Steel is a great coaster. This ride definitely has its flaws, but it still manages to make my list. At the number 20 spot, we have a bit of a controversial pick with Fahrenheit the Intamin Looper. This is one of 3 Hershey Park Intamins that'll make an appearance on this list. But first off, what a wacky ride. This ride has a little bit of everything. A rare vertical lift hill, an airtime filled drop, plenty of unique inversions, and even a few airtime moments sprinkled throughout the layout. Fahrenheit is sort of like Intamin's version of an Infinity Coaster, and I think it does a good job competing with that model. I also like the sweet new paint job it got for this season. One complaint that bothers me a tiny bit from time to time is the presence of a rattle, but I haven't had much of an issue with this because I'm used to Ride of Steel's rattle, which I consider to be much worse. Overall, Fahrenheit is a solid attraction and doesn't have very many flaws. At the number 19 spot, we have the first B&M Hyper on this list with Apollo's Chariot. What a fun ride. I really liked Apollo's Chariot when I got plenty of rides on it on my trip to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Apollo is a stunning setting in the woods of Busch Gardens and it really works into its favor, especially at night. Apollo has some decent floater, especially toward the end of the return trip. I was able to get a night ride where I counted over 10 lightning strikes, so that was really cool. That ride really did it for me and helped to establish Apollo as a very solid hyper in my opinion. The main flaws of this coaster are the rattle and the relatively weak floater airtime. However, the setting makes up for that. Taking the number 18 spot is the second Strata coaster on this list with Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. I love Top Thrill Dragster. It fixes many of the issues that Kingda Ka has, which is kind of ironic since that coaster was built before Dragster, but I digress. However, I'm yet to get a front row ride on this coaster, so there's only room to grow. I love the view on this coaster, the restraints are perfect, and best of all, it's silky smooth. This coaster towers over the point, which is not an easy feat, and I think this ride has way more presence in the park than Kingda Ka has at Great Adventure, with it being proudly placed front and center in the park for everyone to see. Dragster is a great ride and can only go up on this list from here. I really gotta get back on this coaster and get that front row ride I've been craving. Taking the number 17 spot, we have our second B&M Hyper on this list with Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland. Behemoth is a very solid B&M Hyper. It manages to pack in the airtime nearly on every single hill. This coaster has some of the more stronger airtime on a B&M Hyper, and I think the stadium style seating makes the ride a bit better for views and could even help make the airtime stronger. I think the curved drop on this ride is pretty good, and the ride is pretty compact along the water, which makes for a solid setting. The ride's one flaw is its rattle. This might be one of the most brutal rattles that I've ever experienced to date, which definitely knocks this ride down a few notches. But other than that, Behemoth is a very good hyper. At the number 16 spot, we have another B&M Hyper with Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I really like this ride. I've gotten some of the best rides you can get on this ride in the heat of summer in 2019 and 2020, or at least that's what I've been told. I've ridden this ride well over a dozen times and I've had quite a few grayouts. This coaster has a big footprint and gives a lot of solid airtime. It shares a lot of the same qualities with Behemoth, but the reason it ranks one spot higher is because I find it to be more enjoyable than Behemoth. Behemoth's rattle takes away from the ride. Even though Nitro has a rattle, it's not nearly as bad and it doesn't ruin the ride. The airtime and layout of this coaster makes this coaster really fun, and that's what gets it in the top 20. At the number 15 spot, we got a bit of an upset with Gale Force at Playland's Castaway Cove in Ocean City, New Jersey. What a unique coaster. This is the only launched El Loco model made by S&S, and I really hope to see more of these because this is an awesome ride. Why is it so good, you ask? Airtime, airtime, airtime. I got a lot of hype for this ride a day or two before I rode it, and it definitely lived up to my expectations. It probably even exceeded them, to be completely honest. This ride is unreal. Almost every element chucks you out of your seat. You feel like a ping pong ball between the restraint and the seat for the whole ride. The launches are insane and forceful. The second cycle is just so crazy. The pacing is even faster, making the airtime even more intense, so it's just pure insanity. However, with this being a prototype, there are a couple issues. One of my issues was on me for only giving myself enough time to get one ride on an end seat. On the bright side, that one ride was in the front row. I was told to avoid the end seat, but I didn't get much of a choice, so I just kind of had to roll with it. Next, the seats are really low to the ground, which isn't that much of an issue, but it kind of feels awkward since you're riding at a weird position. Lastly, this ride was fully retracked a couple years ago since the track alignments were made poorly. There is a slight rattle, but it's nothing too bad. But all in all, Gale Force is a great gem in New Jersey, and I'll probably have to make the effort to get back to it someday for more rides. At the number 14 spot, we have another launch coaster with Stormrunner at Hershey Park. This coaster is just so much fun. My first ride on this coaster was a back row night ride, and wow, this thing is forceful. The layout on this coaster is so unique, and I love how high the elements are elevated off the ground. The trains are nice and comfortable, so they don't take much away from the ride. It's really sad to see this coaster close because it adds so much more energy to the park when it's open. The only real knock on this coaster is that the layout is pretty short and there's not that much airtime, but the intensity and forces totally make up for that. Overall, Stormrunner is a great accelerator coaster, and I can't wait until we hear, "Now get ready, here we go," once again. At the number 13 spot, we have our first Giga Coaster on this list with Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. This coaster was my very first Giga Coaster and B&M's first Giga Coaster, and they did a very good job at it. A lot of people say this coaster is a glorified hyper, and that's really what it is. But what's so bad about that? Hypers are awesome. This coaster is all about the speed, and we know that this coaster does a lot of similar things to what B&M Hypers do, but take all those elements with the wind pushing you back into your seat and just totally wrecking your face. Combine this with some solid filler airtime and you got yourself a great coaster. Also, don't forget about the crazy drop. I love this ride for what it is, and not comparing it to some of the newer Gigas. Don't take this ride for granted. Enjoy its greatness to help pave the way for some of the best coasters in the world. At the number 12 spot, we have the most iconic coasters of all time with the Millennium Force at Cedar Point. What an epic ride. This ride is so cool, especially for your first ride. Millennium Force brings so much speed just like the other Giga coasters, and it really does those bank turns better than any other coaster. This ride definitely pulls some decent forces contrary to popular belief. This coaster also brings some great Full-Ejector style airtime over those massive camelbacks as well. You can't forget about that speed at the end of the layout as well. One more thing you gotta love is the view and how exposed you are on this coaster. And that's what really makes this ride for me. The one issue I have with this ride is the minor rattle, but it isn't even that bad. Overall, Millennium Force is a great ride and it needs to get the credit it deserves. At the number 11 spot, we have Phoenix at Knoebels. Phoenix is an incredible ride. Who could tell a ride with a layout so simple could provide so much airtime? This ride is awesome and I can't express how cool this ride is. Is it the best wooden coaster in the world? No. But this ride does do so much more than it was meant to do, and it's truly incredible. I love this ride for all the airtime and nostalgia it gives. It's such a cool ride, and the park that it's in is amazing too. The only flaws with this ride are really the stats and the strength of the airtime early in the ride, but those last few bunny hills more than make up for that. Overall, this coaster is a definition of some old-fashioned fun. At the number 10 spot, we have one of the few intensity-based coasters on this list with Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa. Kumba is probably my favorite standard looping coaster to date. This ride is so intense. Every inversion on this ride brings it to you, and it doesn't let up until you hit the final brake run. I think this ride is one of the best intensity inversion-based coasters that I've ridden. I love the hell roll and those picturesque corkscrews. The loop over lift hill is absolutely massive and it feels like you hang there forever. This ride does have a slight B&M rattle, but it's not bad for its age at all. This coaster really gets me hyped for some of the other old school B&Ms out there because this ride is awesome. At the number 9 spot, surprise surprise, we have Busch Gardens Tampa's other old school B&M, Montu, the park's B&M invert. What a ride. This coaster is the picture perfect B&M invert as far as I'm concerned. This coaster does everything Kumba does and more, but it does it under the track. This ride is flat out awesome. Every inversion is great, especially that oh so special Batwing. The trenches, like Talon, give you an amazing sense of speed, which is always a good thing. This ride is another old school B&M that brings it the whole way. And unlike Kumba, this coaster is silky smooth. You won't find any headbanging on this coaster. I also love how they work some theming around and during the ride. I love this coaster and it sits proudly as my favorite inverted coaster. Number 7 and 8 were so close. I could see these rides flipping in the future, but here's how I rank them. At the number 8 spot, I have Mako, the B&M Hypercoaster at SeaWorld Orlando. Man, this coaster is so much fun. This coaster is almost anything you'd want in a great hyper. I love all the airtime hills as they all deliver great airtime. I love how it hauls straight through that. I love the ending of this coaster too. If you're lucky, you can get some sideways airtime on some of those turns toward the end. I love the speed hill and the setting next to the water. The one main problem I have with this ride is the mid-course brake run, but that isn't that big of a deal. Overall, there's not much they could have done to make this ride better, but the coaster ahead of it was just outstanding when I rode it. At the number 7 spot, we have Candymonium at Hershey Park. That's right, I prefer Candymonium over Mako for one main reason: the sideways airtime hill. This element doesn't feel like it belongs at a B&M, but it's there anyway and provides an incredibly unique pop-up ejector airtime. This coaster ends with a huge bang with the helix around the fountain, and I love that. This and Mako are very similar. The first half probably goes to Mako by a hair, but the second half no doubt goes to Candymonium. I do have to mention that the first hill is probably one of the best moments of floater airtime ever, because the hill gives you a few seconds of sustained floater airtime and it's just so cool. Overall, Candymonium is such a great coaster for Hershey Park and provides a nice change of pace from some of the other rides in the park. At the number 6 spot, we have Maverick, the Intamin Blitz coaster at Cedar Point. This coaster kind of reminds me a lot of Fahrenheit, but jacked on Cedar Point steroids. Cedar Point knew from a mile away they had a winner on their hands with this coaster. I love this ride for its variety of elements. This coaster has a little bit of everything: great drop, great airtime, great launches, great inversions, and crazy intensity. This coaster warrants more appreciation from people than it actually gets. This coaster actually made me have to take a little time out from the park because of how intense it was. I love this ride so much, and I think my more seasoned body and mind for this coaster will be prepared next time I take on this monster ride. Kicking off the top 5, we have Phantom's Revenge, Kennywood's Morgan Hyper Coaster. I love a good old terrain coaster, and boy, this takes that to a whole nother level. Kennywood made such a great choice when they decided to convert Steel Phantom to this coaster. I love this ride, mainly for its layout and airtime. The second drop builds so much speed for the rest of the coaster and sets the tone for the crazy ride ahead. The ending is what makes this ride great though. There's so many great moments of ejector airtime at the end of the ride, and I love it so much. The restraints are so minimal, so this makes the airtime just that much better. This ride is perfection in a park that's been a mess for the last couple of years, so that makes this ride stand out even more. At the number 4 spot, we have the legendary Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion. This coaster is by far the best Giga coaster I've ridden, but for a short period of time, I didn't really like this ride. In fact, after I first got off this ride, I didn't even rank it as top 5 in the park. The ride aggressively snapped my neck, and it felt off for the next few hours. However, I gave this ride another chance at night, and it was amazing. This coaster is crazy. The drop is crazy, the turns are crazy, all the hills are crazy, and there's really nothing about this ride that just isn't insanity. I'm not the biggest fan of intensity, but it's grown on me over the years. I love this coaster for what it is, and the only things that hold me back from making this ride even higher is the slight rattle that it has toward the back, and it's not my favorite type of coaster. But beyond that, this coaster is excellent and deserves all the hype that it gets. At the number 3 spot, we have El Toro, the Intamin Prefab Woody at Six Flags Great Adventure. This ride is probably the closest thing to bull riding that most of us will ever get. This ride is nuts. There's 4 crazy moments of ejector airtime on this coaster, and wow, they're great. The drop, the 2 camelbacks, and the Rolling Thunder Hill. The rest of the ride has some fun moments of floater airtime and some good moments of intensity and laterals. The one major downside of this ride is the roughness. It's really weird because in some rows this coaster is a lot smoother. In the second to back row, this ride is much smoother than the back row. I know there's reasons for this, but it's crazy how much of a difference one row makes. The other thing is the pacing. This coaster doesn't always have the best pacing, but when it's on, it's on. This coaster can be the best in the world when it wants to be, but until it can become a little more consistent, this is where it ranks. At the number 2 spot, we have the only RMC I've ridden with Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. This ride knocked my freaking socks off. I love this coaster when I rode it. Airtime, 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 and even more airtime. There's so many airtime moments on this coaster, including the big 3 airtime hills in the middle of the ride. There's so many great moments of hang time on this coaster as well. This ride is amazing and there's no way around that. I don't know anyone who dislikes this coaster. I really don't have a single issue or complaint about this ride. It's just that good. This ride gets me so hyped for the bigger RMCs and quite frankly every RMC that I haven't ridden. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. My favorite coaster in December of 2020 is Skyrush at Hershey Park. This is probably getting me a lot of interesting comments, but this ride is freaking awesome. I've had so many amazing rides, including a number of Zen rides in 2017 at a VIP event, but I'll get into that another time. But where do I even start with this thing? Skyrush is one hell of a coaster. The first drop is the strongest airtime on any drop I've ever felt. There's so many great moments of airtime on this ride. That first airtime hill is like a speed hill. You get that small hill at full speed, and that absolutely can sever your legs. I don't mind the restraints that much because yes, they can be painful, but they're so open and give the upper half of your body so much room. Another thing is that this ride hauls from start to finish and is almost as intense as I-305. This is the perfect ride for my preferences, and I love this ride so much. I'm not going to keep you here too long, but yeah, this ride is awesome. So that's how my top 25 coasters list looks as of now. Please, please, please respect me in the comments and everyone else. Don't be that guy who ruins this video and the person that nobody likes for making an opinion. But feel free to express your opinion in the comments below in a friendly manner. But I do want to hear what you think, and make sure to tell me some of your favorite coasters as of now. I'd like to thank you all for the support you've given this year, and I can't wait to see how my list compares to this in 2021. With that being said, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more coaster content coming soon. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.